So like there was an interesting conversation which I had in CMDA once. So like we were doing a triple light all. So the CMDA planners came to me and said, sir, இது வரைக்கும் டபுள் லைட்லாம் பார்த்துருக்கோம், ட்ரிபிள் லைட்லாம் நீங்கள் ஏன் சார் போடுறீங்க, எங்கெங்கேயோ போய் படிச்சுட்டு வந்து எங்கள் உயிர் வாங்குறீங்க. Then we were like, sir, there is no norm in the CMDA rule book which says I can't do triple height space. Finally, the client had to give an undertaking to CMDA saying that we will not build anything inside the triple volume and we will utilize it only for the sake of a convention center. Only then CMDA let us. So the the framework of bylaws in the city itself is very strange, very difficult to work around with respect to when you're trying to innovate and do something different. If you're doing something run of the mill, it's okay. But if you're trying to do something slightly off track, then the rule book will come back and bite you. So this is one experience which we had as a young architect. Going inside CMDA is a good experience. You'll have a lot of fun, but you need to be patient. You wouldn't believe that this project has been completed on 2,000 rupees per square feet of built up area, including interiors. So this entire project cost 20 crores. So the cost of this project is completely based on the fact that thank you, Mr. Raja, for inviting. I'm very happy to be a part of Thali Talks, and it's an honor to be presented in your forum. My name is Vigneswar, and I'm an architect. I graduated my bachelor's in architecture from CEPT Ahmedabad, and I did my master's in the Netherlands at TU Delft. I worked for a couple of years in firms in Chennai and Bangalore, and also some freelancing work in the Netherlands before I came back to Chennai and started my own firm. Our firm is called Architecture Plus Value, or A plus V for short. Our motto is adding value through design, and it's been about 8 years since we are present as a practice in Chennai city, and we are very happy to have grown and scaled our organization to a larger level. And we have done projects of this scale which we are sitting in right now called GKS Convention Centre. This was one of our first large projects which came into our practice. And in this project we have done a lot of experimentation with respect to how can an architect add value through design to the project. Value in terms of all aspects, value in terms of monetary returns for the project, value in terms of value engineering, reducing the budget, value in terms of how people use the facility and how we can add value to their experience in this particular place. So GK's Convention Center kind of emphasizes on that particular value addition through design concept. This project was a competition actually at one point. It was a competition between some of the biggest architects in city. So the client, I mean, we never hoped to get this project actually. So in the sense that this was too large for a young firm to take kind of a project. So the client kind of invited us and said, okay, why don't you give a free design proposal? So as young architects and you have done so much of work and you know so many different methods of approaching things. So we gave an approach which was very different. So we gave an approach which was totally vertical. So that approach was what won the project for us actually, more than the fact that we were young, we didn't have a portfolio, we didn't have a big office, we didn't have too much of team, but nonetheless it's the approach and the way we approached the client and presented the design won the project for us. So that was a starting point. Actually உண்மையாக சொல்லணும்னா இனிஷியலி பயம் இருந்தது உள்ள இல்லைன்னு நான் வந்து பொய்யே சொல்ல மாட்டேன். பயந்துன்னு தான் இருந்தோம், எப்படிடா இந்த மாதிரி பெரிய ப்ராஜெக்ட்ஸ்லாம் எடுப்போன்ட்டு. பட் இன்னொரு சைடு வந்து ஆம்பிஷன். பிகாஸ் நான் நெதர்லாண்ட்ஸ்லேயும் சரி அஹமதாபாத்லேயும் சரி ஐ ஹவ் டெல்ட் வித் லார்ஜர் ப்ராஜெக்ட்ஸ் இன் டிசைன் ஸ்டூடியோ, லார்ஜர் ப்ராஜெக்ட்ஸ் வித் வேர் ஐ வாஸ் ஒர்க்கிங் இன் தி ஃபர்ம்ஸ் ஐ வாஸ் ஒர்க்கிங் இன், அண்ட் அந்த ஆசை and one vision also to a large extent in the sense that ஏன் இப்படி பண்ணுறாங்க, இதை கொஞ்சம் வேறு மாதிரி பண்ணக்கூடாதா, இது வேறு மாதிரி பண்ணால் இந்த மாதிரி வராதா, ஏன் இது வந்து இப்போது ஃபார் எக்ஸாம்பிள் there was this large institution building which I was working on in one of the offices. அங்கே வந்து I was the site architect. அங்கே சைட் ஆர்கிடெக்டாக இருக்கும்போது வந்து the site supervisors or the project management team and the architectural team always used to fight. My job was to satisfy both of them and balance the whole thing here and there. And so both the teams used to come to me and polemify. That was their job. So I used to be managing between them. Then only I understood, okay, why are these people, I started empathizing more with the site team rather than my own office where I was working in. At that point only I realized that I am tired of doing projects with firms which are more focused only on the visual output of a particular project or keeping a particular strange notion of what architecture is. So I want architecture to be more grounded. So I wanted to be more in the sense that I was not afraid of going commercial. A lot of architects, especially the sept architects, have this very strange notion that you should not work with developers, you should not work with certain kind of clients, you should not grow commercial like that. I didn't have that kind of a thing. I was like, I'm okay with taking any kind of project, even commercial projects are okay with me. But the fact is that I want to understand the basis of that project and I want to grow it from ground up. So if, for example, let us take GKS Convention Centre. I will explain the approach which kind of won us the project. So the client very simply said, I want a Kalyana Mandapam. So I want a Kalyana Mandapam which is iconic, and this land belongs to our family. It has been in our family for generations together. So I want a Kalyana Mandapam and it has to look grand. It has to be traditional. This was one thing. So the point is that this brief was good and they had certain case studies which they had showed us. So like I want it like this. The case study which they had showed us was 1500 seater, but it was spread on 7 acres of land. This was in Nellore. So when we looked at that case study and looked at this site, that was on the outskirts of a city which was completely undeveloped. So there was no context, nothing, and there was this shell structure which that mandapam was there. Now when you bring and look into this site which we are sitting in right now, Avadi, so this is a very jam-packed site. It is 1 acre and the same 1500 seating capacity we had to achieve. So we decided to go completely vertical in this particular project. So this project is one of the few convention centers which is completely vertically organized. So where the circulation, there are multiple ramps which are taking you to the top first floor level. There's one taking you to the basement ground floor level. So there is a circulation loop which is designed around the project, and the first floor is where the main hall is there. You enter into the first floor through a large ramp. So, and another thing is that a wedding venue is used maximum 50 to 60 days a year. What happens to the remaining 300 days? This was an important question which we asked the client. And then we proposed to the client saying that why is it that you want to restrict yourself, saying that I only want to conduct marriages and I want a venue which caters to one particular kind of a crowd. Why can't we expand the audience of this particular place? Because this convention center, it would fetch a lot more revenue for you if you expand it and throw it open to all different kinds of clients. Like for example, if it can host an industrial convention, it can host birthday parties, it can host the Shashtrapti kind of functions. So how do I make a building which is capable of taking all these kind of different events together? That is where this whole concept of how to bring in this traditional motives without diluting the modern aspects of the building came into picture. Because a traditional Kalyana Mandapam cannot host an industrial convention in most cases. So we wanted a building which can host both, and we wanted a building which can work in parts and as a whole. So if you take the whole building can work as one single large event venue, where the first floor can have a large 1500 seater wedding and ground floor can have 500 seater dining and all that, or it could be leased in 2 different events, and the ground floor can be separated further into smaller events of 200 or 300 caps packs. So that kind of flexibility we wanted in the design, and that was also one thing. And additionally we proposed a commercial part. So the mandapam or any convention center needs a lot of revenue to maintain it throughout the year, throughout the life cycle of the building. So we suggested bring in a commercial component which is around 6,000 to 7,000 square feet. Utilize the ground floor footprint which you have, let it be a retail, it will face the street and it will bring in a lot more revenue. And additionally what will happen is that it will help for the maintenance and it will cover your entire maintenance cost of the entire premises. That was something which the client really liked. because maintaining such a premises itself costs a huge amount of money. It takes away from the profit of what the event brings into the place. So if you have something additional in that building which is bringing you more revenue throughout the year, it offsets the entire maintenance cost. So this was something which was suggested. All these approaches were what really impressed the client and gave us the project. Additionally, it was also the way we conceived the first floor of this building. So a large span structure like this thing usually is a PEB shed, and they do a grand fall ceiling. So we decided saying that why not make the structure as an expressive part of the building? Why can't this structure itself be the whole architecture of this particular space? Why do I need to hide a steel structure? Can I express it in such a way that it brings out the beauty of that engineering which has gone into that particular structure? How do I light up that thing? And that entire structure takes the service load. So all the services are packed inside that curved roof which you see on the top. So that I will explain to you. So this is what was the approach which we followed in GKS Convention Centre. Like majority of these convention centers are locked 100 minimum 200 days a year. They are locked, minimum to minimum. The biggest, most successful ones. You take any big names like Raja Annamalai, or you take MRC or anything of this sort. 200 days a year they are locked. So we did not want that to happen to this center. And the architecture of the whole point is that we did not want that commercial and the architecture of the convention center to clash at any point. So that needed to be kept separate, and this needed to be kept separate, and this needed to be the highlight. So the highlight of this thing, when you approach this building itself, you will only see the convention center first. Even though that guy has done a lot of signage and branding and everything, that is still low key. So the convention center is what gets the highlight, and that was an important part of the whole design also, which we went through. So with respect to GKS Convention Centre design, so first thing is with respect to understanding the bylaws and the norms which are required for a convention center like this thing. So we had to study the CMDA rules in detail, and it required a large setback and a 6-meter setback for fire driveway. And this building, as I told you, was developed vertically. So there is a large basement which takes over the entire parking. There is a large service backup which is there in terms of fire pump room, sewage treatment plants, water treatment plants, and this is a completely rainwater harvesting building. So there's a large 1 lakh liter capacity rainwater harvesting sump which is allocated. Besides this, there is also all the other booking office, those kind of aspects which are taken into account here. Then in the ground floor plane, ground floor is where the crux of the whole project is there. How do I maximize my floor plate and keep the circulation intact? So for that, to solve that, we gave a large ramp which leads you directly into the first floor level. So there is, and it takes the entire visitor load, everything onto the first floor level, and underneath that you have a separate lobby which takes you into the ground floor. So there are 2 parallel driveways which are there in that project which lead you into 2 different functions. So even if there are 2 events which are happening in the hall, they can still manage to function without clashing each other. And also besides that, there was a lot of challenges with respect to the entire height of the building and with respect to CMDA norms itself. So like there was an interesting conversation which I had in CMDA once. So like we were doing a triple light all. So the CMDA planners came to me and said, "Sir, இது வரைக்கும் டபுள் லைட்லாம் பார்த்துருக்கோம், ட்ரிபிள் லைட்லாம் நீங்கள் ஏன் சார் போடுறீங்க? எங்கெங்கேயோ போய் படிச்சுட்டு வந்து எங்கள் உயிர் வாங்குறீங்க." Then we were like, "Sir, there is no norm in the CMDA rule book which says I can't do triple height space." இல்லை சார், நீங்கள் டபுள் ஹைட்டுன்னு டெக்ஸ்ட் போடுங்க, ஆனால் ஹைட்டு 9 மீட்டர்ஸ்ன்னு போட்டுக்கோங்க, நாங்கள் எப்படி மேனேஜ் பண்ணிக்கிறோம். Finally, the client had to give an undertaking to CMDA saying that we will not build anything inside the triple volume and we will utilize it only for the sake of a convention center. Only then CMDA let us. So the the framework of bylaws in the city itself is very strange, very difficult to work around with respect to when you're trying to innovate and do something different. If you're doing something run of the mill, it's okay. But if you're trying to do something slightly off track, then the rule book will come back and bite you. So this is one experience which we had as a young architect. Going inside CMDA is a good experience. You'll have a lot of fun, but you need to be patient. So with respect to that, that was one aspect. Secondly, at the circulations I explained, so there's a large industrial kitchen and service part of this building. So this building required a huge amount of service consultants. So there was a kitchen consultant, there's an acoustic consultant, there was a fire fighting consultant, there's a plumbing, electrical, lighting consultant. So there's a huge team of consultants who we had to work around with. So at the end of the day, our job became like an orchestra master. So we had to have the vision of this building very clear from day one and make everyone work according to that vision and then get enthusiastic about working on that vision. That is the most important part. So your team of consultants cannot be frustrated working on a project because a project of this nature has a lot of revisions. It requires a lot of patient handling of different conflicts which will happen in different areas. So all those things needs to be handled enthusiastically by those consultants. So you need to really engage them with your vision and where we are going and what we are building towards the end. So அந்த consultants புரிய வெச்சிட்டோம்னா they will work happily on this project. And they are also very proud of the fact that they have they have worked on this project. Now with respect to GKS Convention Centre, we are also very happy as a firm. It has won us good recognition. It won a special mention in this Indian Institute of Architects Tamil Nadu chapter award. So that was a very happy moment for the entire team of consultants who had worked very hard on this project. So those aspects we have done, and the next aspect is the engineering aspect of this building, the structure itself. So the structure of this building has been planned with a lot of care and effort. So there is a raft foundation with PT slabs which are taken for the basement and ground floor roof. The first floor is a completely curved truss which is there, and that curved truss is expressed with respect to lighting. So the lighting is done up through in such a way that it highlights the bones of the entire structure. And it also takes care of all the services like your HVAC, electrical, your plumbing, firefighting lines, everything is in the ceiling, but you see none of those points. So there was a lot of careful planning with respect to how it can be concealed and brought together. It's a puff sheet, so it's an insulated puff sheet. So there are two layers of metal which are sandwiched by this rock wool insulation, which takes care of sound insulation and also heat. So there is also no rain, when rain comes and hits the roof there is little sound, so that is also dissipated by that insulation, and from the inside you don't feel the heat. And because of the triple volume, the volume is such that the hot air is taken care of and the cool air is almost well taken care of. So there's a good temperature which is maintained inside the first floor hall also. So I would say that even though the client wanted traditional, we sold the idea of tradition infused with modernity. Because we didn't, we were building in 2020 or 2019 rather, when this project was in full speed. So we didn't want something to look like it was built in 1950. It needed to be contemporary. So we took certain traditional forms like a temple on a hill, நம்ம பழனியில அந்த மலை ஏறி போய் அந்த ஒரு temple, that kind of a feel. We got Dasavadaram logos, all those things, and we express them in the most modern contemporary manner in which it is possible. So the temple is completely done in CNC fabricated steel. So it was designed in a parametric software, and then we customized each of these materials in that particular temple and then got it fabricated and hand done completely and erected here on site. That was with respect to the temple. With respect to the Dasavadaram, so there are these Dasavadaram panels which are there along the entire site. So they are again CNC cut with respect to aluminum and backlit to bring out the effect of the logo, and they are mounted in different locations. That is all. They are very simple things. They are very cost effective also. So it was done at a very low cost. That was again something which the client was very impressed with. And there is another material which we have used called GFRC. So this GFRC is used for doing all these murals and logos, and like for example these special lighting elements which you see here are all done in GFRC. So they have this beautiful material which you can cast in any way. So they are done in small pieces and they are assembled across the hall to bring a highlight of the entire architecture of the building. Design part of it, the biggest struggle for us was the number of revisions which this project went through. This project had 50 revisions. R50 is what you see here built. So there's a huge amount of revisions which went into the design of this particular structure. So there was a lot of these multiple brainstorming, multiple inputs from different consultants. And being a wedding venue, there was also different aspects which we had to take into account, like how it would be marketed, who was the final people who are going to be using it, who is the customer who is going to bring in maximum amount of revenue into this project. So those kind of discussions were there, and also the service structure and acoustics related challenges were there. This is one project where acoustics has given a lot of importance. If you go to any of the marriage halls, you have this cacophony of sounds which are there around you. So to avoid that from happening, there is a lot of importance given to acoustics inside the hall. So there is, even if there's music playing or there's a band playing, you won't have this echo and reverberations inside. So there is this perforated roof which we have given, perforated elements in the roof. There's a wooden panel which is there on the walls. So these are all aspects which we have taken care of, and also heating and ventilation of this particular air conditioning of this structure. So we have kept the lobbies as non-air conditioned specifically to bring down the heat, the current consumption of this particular project. So this ground floor lobby and the first floor lobby are completely naturally ventilated, and they have only fans. So it's only in the insides which I have the ACs, and they are used very sparingly, so that they run it about 2 hours for a 5-hour event, so that to conserve energy, and it is also the cooling is maintained inside the hall well. So that is also something which is a big bonus for the client, because they are saving on a huge amount of electricity bill in that way. That's an interesting question, because the kitchen is something which was a very difficult portion of this project. It had to have a separate entry for the services, and it's a very service intensive area. And we have designed this kitchen with a lot of care in making sure that it's easy to maintain, easy to access, and also completely out of sight. It is something which you do not want people to see at any point, because it's a very messy area. And we have designed the services with the backyard, so that all the aspects are taken care of there. And being a vertically divided building, the services part was very difficult. So you have a lot of these ducts and everything going, which are hidden in shafts, and they're taken to the terrace, where there's a large fresh air machine which sucks the air out and makes sure that the kitchen is clean. Again, we had a beautiful kitchen consultant who worked with us on that particular project, and they also supplied a lot of these kitchen utensils. So the kitchen is designed around the flow of work. So there's a specific South Indian counter, there's a specific North Indian counter. So there are these different areas of the kitchen which are used for specific functions. So which was again an interesting process to see how they work around in that particular kitchen. But as an architect, you're supposed to stand back and let those people do their job. That is your thing. You should not interfere too much into what they are doing, because they know the process. It's almost an industrial process, so they know the process well. So you are there to give the space required for that, and make sure that nothing is hindering their workflow. And your job is to ensure that it is remaining out of sight, and it is easy to service, easy to approach, besides being closer to the road and not cluttering the entire visual aspects of the building. So the flow in this particular project was, there was a design conceptual stage, and that design concept was finalized, and there was a vision which was very clear. So the client and the architect were very clear about the vision of the project. So this is what we wanted at the end of the day. And once that was arrived at, we then managed to go into the next stage, which is the execution stage. So once the vision was clear, we had a particular framework, but that framework was very flexible. So like once the structure, services and all these aspects started coming in, so there were multiple revisions which went on in the project without losing the essence of what we were trying to do. So the flow was always like, one thing was finalized, where we needed to go, and then the consultants back and forth worked on and weaved within that whole thing to reach that final goal. So that is how it worked in this project. No, there were a lot of changes in design. That was the reason why there were 50 revisions in the whole working drawings of this project. So, but what was the essence is that the original, if you see the original walkthrough which we did in 2016 and what the building we are sitting in right now, the essence of that building has been derived at here. What is the kind of spaces we wanted, what is the kind of output we wanted, that has been achieved completely. So it is a big success. But the process which we follow to reach there is not straight. So there were multiple clashes between different consultants which we came, and besides that we were also young firm, we were in a process of experimenting. So we were trying to understand what these different consultants were trying to say, and as a young consultant there is a big bonus in working in these large projects, because you don't have an ego. So you are willing to listen to all these consultants and let them do their job, and some of them are very experienced, very knowledgeable. You learn a lot working with them. So you will be like, sir, why is it that you are asking for this? Then they'll give a big explanation as to why a particular duct needs to be, taken in this particular manner, in this particular location, and why the outflow of that particular duct needs to be in this particular area in this way. and therefore the ceiling height will get compromised. Now then the fire consultant will come and say that my fire line has to pass in this particular way. So is there any other alternative route for routing all these things? So then we work around with both these consultants, understand them. Sometimes you have to model it in 3D to understand all these clashes, and then we have to bring out what the whole project outcome is going to be without losing the essence. So that was our job. Our job was to let the consultants do their job without affecting the entire outcome of this project. So there was a lot of fun which we had working with these different consultants. Each of them had their own specific style of working, but eventually everyone had to come together.